Good morning, SLCA. I am Scheherazade Taylor, and I am privileged and humbled to be a practitioner here at the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. Today I serve as the moderator for our Practitioner Sunday panel conversation. How many of you have had a conversation about the future? How many of you have had a conversation about your faith in the future? Yeah. And how many of you do have faith in the future? Okay, good. Margaret Weekly, in this month's Book of the Month, Turning to One Another, ask that kind of question, and many other kinds of questions, such as, why is conversation important? And what do we believe about one another? So our practitioners are going to discuss these kinds of questions today, and our practitioners are Idella Veal, Karen Ratz,
Good morning.
Baji Daniels,
Namaste.
and Scott Baker.
Hello.
So let's get started. In her book, Turning to One Another, Margaret Wheatley states, "I believe with all my heart that the only way the world will change is if many more of us step forward, let go of our judgments, become curious about each other, and take the risk to begin a conversation." Scott, why is conversation an important first step in having faith in the future?
Well, let's take a look at what the word conversation actually means. If you look in the dictionary, it is the informal exchange of ideas by spoken word. Now, that first thing is a catch. Spoken? Yeah, it's spoken words. It's that place where I get to meet someone else or a number of people to exchange ideas, to be vulnerable, but to be in this place of trust with someone else to go, here's my idea, what's yours? Because I know that it's my belief that a lot of conversation is driven by fear. Is the fear of perhaps, am I still in the right place? Am I still respected? Am I still loved? Or it may be a fear of the fact that there's someone out there who has the power to influence my life, and I'm scared. And I want to know something. I want to be able to get somebody else's idea because my idea isn't working for me. And maybe you've got an idea that I hadn't thought of, that I got, oh, okay, I can be comfortable. I can let go of my fear with that new idea or that new perspective that I didn't have. So to me, the conversation's important because I get to be in alignment with myself and where I am, but I get to hear from you and you and you and you and understand that, yeah, I don't see everything and somebody else out there might. Or they might need my idea because they're in the same place.
Piggyback on what Scott said about the spoken word and how we as humans think together. Some of the benefits of being in conversation is connection, relationship, enhanced listening, moving forward and getting things done and creating impact. There's power in being in a group, in a discussion. A lot of change is taking place by people just having a discussion, sitting around a table, kitchen table talking, or leaning up against a wall. And they find out, gosh, we've got something in common. So let's move on it. Let's find out who else is interested in moving on this. But what I've read and found out is that we're not staying in conversation long enough to reap these benefits. And some of you may be able to kind of understand what I'm talking, where I'm going right now. Sometimes I find myself on a daily basis holding on to my digital device, sending emails, texting, and realizing that that human touch is missing from that. And what I found out is that technology is not the issue here. What it is that we're not talking with one another. You know, when we can, there's nothing better than face to face, eye to eye contact. Do you agree with that? There's nothing better than being able to reach out and touch somebody's hand, make this world a better place if you can. Going that direction rather than getting up early in the morning before daybreak and sending out tweets. You know.
This is why we don't give practitioners microphones.
You know.
Yeah, we'll end on the tweet moment. So, why is conversation important? I think we're touching on it. For me, it's about assumptions. You remember that old Odd Couple bit about when I assume? Have you heard that one? When I assume, I make an ass out of you and me. And so for me, why conversation is important is I'm fleshing out my assumptions, which basically are prejudgments. I've prejudged something because I've assumed I know something about you or your situation. And so I walk into a conversation with my assumptions, which makes me look like sometimes a rear end. So what I've learned in personal awareness and where we pull in universal principles here is that prejudgment is just a choice, right? I've chosen that thought, I've chosen to think that, and if I can get aware of that thought, if I can flesh it out, then I can either choose, I can change it. I'm at least shining the light on it, right? At least allows me to realize I've chosen that and that it's an assumption. It's not the truth, it's an assumption. So one of the things I've been doing is I've been lately detaching with love. And when I first heard that phrase, I thought it sounded cold-hearted. But what I've learned is when I detach with love, because Margaret Wheatley talks about that conversations ultimately are love, when I detach with love, what I've done is I've given that other person space to have their highest expression, which is not my job to agree with or disagree with. It is simply their highest expression. And then I can respond in my highest expression. So for me, this detached with love idea has been helpful in fleshing out my prejudgments and my assumptions. And one of the things Margaret Wheatley says about that is it's not differences that divide us. It's our judgments about each other's that do.
Why is conversation important to me? I see conversation as a great gift to us as human beings. And the word that Karen just introduced, that word love, that is the essence of who we are. We are love. Whether I'm aware of that essence at every moment of my life or not, does not negate the fact that that is the truth of my being. And we had a beautiful example of conversation this morning in adult study. We had so many people in the room that we had to bring in more chairs today. And we had an opportunity to do really what is involved in conversation. There's basically 4 parts to it. There's the talking, there is the thinking, there is the listening, and there's the feeling. And most of us are pretty good at one, maybe two. And you know, I'm referring to the talking and the thinking. And we may not be thinking about what the person is saying. We may be thinking about what we're going to respond.
What is she talking about? To whom is she speaking?
Maybe if we were to listen, we'd...
And that aspect of feeling. Conversation is important because it allows me to feel another person. And I say another person because in truth, having been a part of this philosophy for a number of years, and whether you're new with it or have been studying science of mind for a while, we are taught that in truth there's only one of us here. Mm-hmm. So that other person is a reflection of me. So I'd like to offer this for you to think about when you have a conversation and might experience some conflict, some discomfort. I know that you thought that what you heard is what I said, but what you heard is not what I meant.
All right. So here, at the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, as Deidre mentioned, our vision is that it's a world that works for everyone. And Margaret Wheatley stated, I still believe that if we turn to one another, if we begin talking with each other, especially with those who are strange or our enemies, then this world can reverse its darkened direction and change for the good. Idella, given these statements, what do you believe about others and how can your belief affect the world we live in?
What I choose to believe about others creates my own personal experience. And this is what we're taught in Science of Mind. And Scott LaSalle so eloquently spoke it all during his prayer. I believe that we're all made of God's stuff, the goodness of God to the core. And I believe we all have a need to be needed. I feel that we're all ready and willing to offer our services to be support to other people. And people desire to be needed. So I just feel that at the core, we are love. And I have faith in humanity that we will always rise to the occasion when we are needed to, and when we're depended upon to be there, to be support to others. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And Adela, I know right where you're going from there. That's my thought too. Is I believe that the core of everybody, and I mean everybody out there, is goodness, is love, and at the same time, I recognize myself. I look at myself, and if I show up with somebody in conversation and I want to be authentic, the first thing I notice is I'm not authentic. Something's coming up. And I recognize myself that my exposure to media has biased me on how I look at somebody based on all the stereotypes that I've seen in the media that I've accepted. So when I come up to somebody and start talking to them, I'm all immediately throwing those projections on there. And I believe this is the case for everybody. So from a place of the teaching, one, if I see something in myself, I recognize it's a mirror and it's going on for somebody else. So they've got the same stuff, but at the core of it is we want to connect. We want to get a message across. And so I know that for myself, what I choose to do is going, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Oh, damn. something's going on here. So let me step out of my fear and see what might be available, because I might get a new insight, create a deeper relationship by stepping through my fear instead of being comfortable and letting my fear show up and say, no, I don't want to talk to you. Nah, you're scary.
Yeah. That's interesting, because Margaret Wheatley talks about being curious and being willing to be disturbed, right? Isn't that the spiritual path? But willing to be disturbed into our, shaken from our certainty. That certainty is kind of, to me, the enemy of our spiritual path. Because the minute I'm sure of something, I'm no longer curious. I had a high school English teacher who asked us this question early on. We were doing a debate class, and she said, all right, we're going to debate whether people are basically good or evil. Thankfully, she let us choose our sides, which was good, because as a devout optimist, I absolutely had to argue on the side that said people are good. But then, of course, we get into the debate, and the ultimate question always is, what about Hitler? And so that's what the people debating on the people are evil side brought up. Every example they could think of in history of evil people. So if I choose to think that people are good, right, then I'm labeling the evil ones, in air quotes, the evil ones as the outliers. If I have a worldview that say people are basically evil, then you do the reverse, right? Well, then those good ones I find are the rare breed out there. What I've learned down this spiritual path, and what I continue to learn, is any suffering going on for someone, doesn't have its roots in evil. It has its roots in their spiritual path unfolding. That's what we're doing, is we are, it doesn't mean I condone it. It doesn't mean I have to hang out with those people who have chosen to go through suffering as their, or even destruction as their path this lifetime. But I can still hold them as a perfect whole child of God.
Absolutely.
From afar.
Absolutely. From afar.
Back up the bus.
And that's what I'm called to do. I'm called to see the good regardless, in spite of. Because what I understand is that there's nothing but energy flowing. We're all energy. And this energy has polarities. There's a high level love, but there's a low level, what? Fear. And people are operating at all varying levels, situation to situation, from love to fear. And we can discern what's present when we are in conversation, right? When we have a feeling of fear that comes up, it feels like resistance. I don't like what I'm hearing. I don't like what that person is saying. And so at that very moment, we have the opportunity to either close down, turn off, you're looking but you're not hearing a thing, or we can just stay awake, recognize there's something happening here that's causing me to have this emotion. I'm going to get curious, not about that person. I'm curious about me. What is it within me that has been triggered? Is it some unhealed stuff from my past experience? So I might just file that for some future work. Because what I know is that I live in a physical world, three-dimensional. I can touch, I can see, I can hear with the ears and so on. But I also know, if everything is energy, that there is something happening on the invisible realm. And so, as a spiritual being, I want to elevate my discernment, my sensitivity to that invisible realm of being. One of the ways I do that is in meditation.
Raji, you're absolutely right. We are called to see the good. Good in self, good in others. And as singer Harry Belafonte, which some of you don't even know who the heck that is, I do, stated, the last source of truth and hope is the people themselves. Understanding how important conversation is and how important what we believe about others is, what are the ways in which we can turn to one another and do what we came here to do, what we were birthed to do, provide a healthy future. Adela, would you start us?
What is my faith in the future? First of all, let's take that word faith. According to the Bible, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Webster says faith is absolute trust and conviction in something unseen. What I know from my studies in science of mind is all we have is now. And what we're doing right here, right now, what we're thinking, the actions that we are performing is creating what will be the future. So, my faith in the future. I have faith in me. And I know living a life of goodness and love and being of service is what I plan to do in the future. So I'm responsible for me and I'm responsible for my actions. But I know that I'm a part of the whole. And as we had stated earlier, that what I believe in others is really the same thing that I believe in me to the core. Like Baji said, some of us may not be aware of our goodness, but it's there. So as we move through these changing times and knowing that each one of us, based on how we think, which is what we're taught in this teaching, creates our future, what is going to happen. So if I'm living a life that I don't like, first of all, I got to take responsibility for this life that I'm living that I don't like. That I have the power within me to make those changes, becoming aware and conscious of what I am thinking to create this path. And in doing so, I can be an inspiration to others. So I do have faith in the future.
And it's that faith that I look at from a global standpoint. We're here because we have ancestors who have, through their consciousness, their love for life, for their children, have brought us here to this moment, at this time, in this place. And so where I look at on things such as global warming, we're in a place right now where we may, make this planet uninhabitable for us. The planet's going to stay around, but we may not. And I look at that and I go, yes, and I'm seeing communities, cities, governments saying we're doing something about it. It's that people are consciously going and making changes to make this world better. And so that's where my faith lies. The future, I have no control over it. It's just going to happen. I have a few things I can control, but my ultimate faith is in our oneness, whether we recognize it consciously or not. We are all one. And as these events come in our lives, we're going to do something about it as a global whole. And that's where I see my faith lies in the goodness of who we are.
Very good. So it's interesting that, so in this Margaret Wheatley book, she talks about that conversation is how humans think together. So it's interesting that she's calling for turning to one another right now, because it's yet a time again to spiral up as we think together. So I think that's why conversations are getting kicked off in a big way. I also think it's why we've got contrast right now. You know what we say in this teaching in spiritual law about what contrast does for you. You get very clear about what you do and don't want. So any contrast in our lives is serving us. Any contrast in our government is serving us. Any contrast in our world is serving us. That is spiritual law, because what we know is that we are eternal souls forever unfolding. So one of the things that is my faith in the future is, and this actually came from another Margaret Wheatley book. She wrote something we studied in Practicioner class about leadership in the new science, which I think David has spoken about in the past when she talks about quantum physics. And what she talks there is about divine chaos. Does anybody have any divine chaos going on in their life? Yeah. Does it feel so divine in certain moments? So I used to call it discontent. And then in my devout optimism mode, I called discontent, I just want to be sure I live up to my fullest potential. You know, I just am driving to live up to my fullest potential. And that was discontent. And then I got personal awareness and more spirituality, and I called it divine discontent. And still sometimes it feels like discontent. But what I know is that contrast is helping each one of us evolve, right? So what I know about literally science is that chaos energy is the other side of divine order. The divine chaos is that creative energy. That bubbling up is what moves things. So I get to choose whether I perceive what's going on in my world, in the globe, whatever right now is a creative energy or a destructive energy. I choose to believe it's divine chaos leading to divine order.
And that sustains your faith, right? And that gives me greater faith for the so-called future, which is really the now, as Idella explained that. And as I have chosen to be on a conscious spiritual path, I'm just walking it out day by day. My intention is to walk it out with love. My intention is to recognize that we all have some wounding from whatever our domesticated past might be. And to the degree that I am willing to acknowledge that and work on that and become a better person, then I am contributing to this collective world, what we sometimes refer to here as race consciousness, the consciousness of the masses. So I'm a part of that. I'm a contributor to that. And that's one of the reasons that I come here. I'm so grateful to be part of a spiritual community that celebrates conversation. Several months ago, before we moved into this building, many of you know, we had 2 conversations about race. I mean, for a spiritual community to do it in the way that that was done, with great sensitivity and respect for the participants, and for us to even have a panel like this, where we're willing to look at one another, to be with one another, to come together and grow. And when we're hurting, when we go through that human experience that creates the pain, not to go off and hide, but to come here and heal.
Could you please give our practitioners a hand? In conclusion, conversation is important because through conversation, human beings think together and can facilitate the unfolding of divine order. What we believe about others creates not only our world, but also our individual, personal experience. Finally, our faith in the future is determined by what we think, what we say, and what we do right now in this moment. As practitioners today, our intention has been to make divine principle personal through conversation. And we hope that you will continue conversations after you leave this place. We will continue questions and answers after the service at the right side of the church.
Hi, I'm David Alt, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.